Happy Saturday, risers. We hope you're having a phenomenal weekend. Sagar and I are back with some of our favorite moments from the week. Nancy Pelosi has been touted as a fierce negotiator for Democrats on the coronavirus economic response. But executive editor at the American Prospect, David Dayen, shared insight on his reporting behind what Democrats really gained or really didn't gain on the CARES Act, or what the other failings were. Let's take a listen.
If there's anyone among Democrats who was responsible for this crisis response, it's Nancy Pelosi. I think that's undeniable. The fact that she was dealing with the Republicans, there was leverage here, I feel like, that was unused. So Republicans knew and spent $2 billion or $2 trillion in federal money because they knew that they were in a very tough position. This was antithetical to most Republican ideology to spend these extreme amounts of money, and to do it in a way that was time limited and insufficient and inadequate for ordinary people, while billionaires and the wealthy and corporations got this huge bailout that is still ongoing, this giant money cannon that went to the Federal Reserve. It either shows priorities or it shows a lack of interest in priorities and really just power for power's sakes.
Yeah. I mean, I think David is always just such a phenomenal person whenever it comes to any of these analyses of corporate power and the Federal Reserve.
They do such good work over there.
The American Prospect, seriously, they are so good. If anybody can support them, please do. Because the work that he's doing is he's pointing out, and look, they blister Republicans all the time too, so it's not a one-way street here. But yeah, he's talking about Nancy Pelosi's inability to really, use her caucus to do anything in order to try and push back. Because I agree in almost a certain respect. At this point, McDonnell and these guys have just been wholesale decided that they're not going to spend the type of money that they want to. I'm even hearing that they want to put a $1 trillion cap on the spend now. I mean, we needed $3 or $4 trillion a month ago, 2 months ago.
Yeah.
So now they're going to say $1 trillion after this. So look, the only hope would be coming from Nancy Pelosi, and even she seems to be playing ball with some of the austerity stuff.
That's the thing, is that, and his piece is so good because he points out, sure, she's famous for being this, she knows how to count the votes, she knows how to deliver the caucus, but it's deliver the caucus in service of what?
Right.
And so what we saw play out here, and part of why I also blister the Democrats as much as I do here, is look, the Republicans had their pride. Mitch McConnell the corporate, caucus over there on the Republican side, they knew what they wanted and they had it locked down out of the gates. Mm-hmm. The only hope for working people really was from the Democratic Party, from Nancy Pelosi. She didn't know what she wanted. They didn't have an agenda laid out, or maybe they did know what they wanted. Maybe she's just as complicit in this, I guess, is the other approach. But essentially what David argues is that to the extent that she has any real ideology, it's all cultural issues and budget deficit hawkery. She's bought into this whole fiscal austerity thing and pulled things out of the Democratic package that didn't even ultimately pass the Senate because of a concern that they cost too much. It's what are you doing? Where are your priorities? Right. What are you thinking about right now? So she failed to use the leverage that they had. They didn't know what they wanted. And ultimately, she's ended up being a major part of why the economic response is the catastrophe. That you can lay that as much at her feet as literally anyone else.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Now, as the national conversation continues about race in America, author and professor Eddie Glaude is using the words of writer James Baldwin to talk about race in context of today. And Glaude is the James S. McDonnell Distinguished Professor at Princeton University and revealed what real progress could look like in this moment.
The metric to measure whether or not true success is happening on this front is a fundamental change in how we think of governance, how we think of policy. We have been living for the last 40 to 50 years in the age of Reagan, or whether you call it Reaganism, Thatcherism, neoliberalism, whatever you have it. And what that has involved is appealing to white resentment, white fear, white grievance, as there is an ongoing exploitation of everyday ordinary workers and extraction of resources from resource-deprived communities. So if we see a fundamental change in the frame, a fundamental change in how we police, a fundamental change in how we think of a public infrastructure of care, now we're on the other side. Now we're thinking about a different way of imagining being together. We can't pat ourselves on the back just simply because people are saying Black Lives Matter now.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I mean, you took issue with some of the way that
I think he's full of it, frankly. I really do.
I think he had a great analysis of, and part of why I like him, and I read the book, actually. The book is excellent. Part of what I like about what he's saying is he has a phenomenal critique of neoliberalism and doesn't let like white liberals off the hook for their complicity in constructing the system that we have today, and wants to go beyond the symbolic, like it's not enough to say Black Lives Matter, it's not enough to kneel with the kente cloth. You've got to actually have real structural change to back this up.
I think that's fine and all, but he didn't have it. I asked him, because he's to blame. He says white supremacy is the chief problem. I said, what does white supremacy have to do with the fact that we shipped jobs to China in 1975 and through the 1980s? There was no answer to that. It was all about, well, the original corporations and all this meta capitalist critique. I just think it's ridiculous. I think Eddie Glaude is just pushing more critical race theory through the guise of like a semi-class politics. And that's why I think his solutions are just BS. I mean, James Baldwin was also the chief king of doing these things like this.
I mean, here's my view is, I don't believe in race reductionism, but I also don't believe in class reductionism.
It's not class reductionist.
Eddie Glaude definitely filters things more through the race lens, and I filter it a little bit more through the class lens. But fundamentally, he is one of the people who's looking at both and isn't just looking at race, because ultimately, and this is one of the things that frustrates me on the left, I got taken out of context one of my radars this week to make it like I said racism isn't a thing with Trump supporters or something stupid that I didn't actually say. But I also think it's silly to try to pull apart the race and the economics. I mean, from the beginning, slavery was about an economic system and about a racist system and a system of oppression, and it's continued throughout our history. So to pretend like race isn't related to economics, that doesn't make any sense.
No one's saying it's not related. What I'm saying is, whenever you try to emphasize, what is the emphasis? The emphasis for Eddie Glaude is racial politics and critical race theory. It has nothing to do with class. I just think the way that I talk here about how class politics, or how Make America Great Again has been co-opted by neoliberals and by people who just want to cut big taxes, I think people aren't stupid. They see the political salience of what you and I are talking about real class politics, about going after corporate power. So they guise their pretty standard message under the same umbrella. I think that's exactly what's happening here. It's very telling to me that he didn't have a clear answer on pretty much anything that I asked him during that interview.
I thought he had very good answers. And I also think that you're somewhat mischaracterizing his position, but people should go
watch it
and watch the whole interview. It's a good tease for that. And that does it for us today. We're going to be back later today with the week that was in media screw-ups.
All right, so make sure you guys hit the subscribe button. You don't miss any of our videos, and don't forget to like and share as well. Tomorrow, we're going to be back for another round of #RisingQs. We'll see you guys then.